Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at. New reporting from WTTW News shows repeated misconduct by police officers cost Chicago taxpayers tens of millions of dollars.
I am today suspending my campaign.
Ron DeSantis is officially out. What Trump and Haley could face in tomorrow's New Hampshire primary.
There are things that government does to support business all across the state, investing in infrastructure.
The latest on the Chicago White Sox eyeing a new home. Is it the right move? We unpack the possibilities.
When this wet, warm air mass hits land and starts to cool again, whammo, lake effect snow.
And WTTW News explains what the heck is lake effect snow. Now to some of today's top stories. Chicago might be moving away from the use of natural gas. A group of alder people are expected to introduce what they're calling the Clean Buildings Ordinance. If approved, it would require new buildings to be all electric powered. But a group of opponents today, including representatives from the natural gas industry, say they want to put a halt to the proposal, and they say it would put onerous restrictions on Chicago building owners.
Proposed clean, affordable building ordinance is neither clean nor affordable. Make no mistake. Chicago must work to reduce its carbon footprint. But during the winter's frigid temperatures, where tens of thousands of Chicagoans were left without electricity, now is the worst possible time to hastily slam through an ordinance without examining true cost.
Local and national politicians mark the anniversary of the now overturned landmark Roe v. Wade decision of 1973. The decision guaranteed the constitutional right to an abortion, but was struck down by the Supreme Court in 2022. Both President Biden and Vice President Harris held events today as Democrats expect to make it central to their general election campaign. In a statement, Biden said, quote, even as Americans from Ohio to Kentucky to Michigan to Kansas to California have resoundingly rejected attempts to limit reproductive freedom, Republican elected officials continue to push for a national ban and devastating new restrictions across the country. On this day and every day, Vice President Harris and I are fighting to protect women's reproductive freedom. Hall of Famer Ryne Sandberg announces he's being treated for metastatic prostate cancer. The former Cubs legend made the announcement today, saying he was diagnosed last week and that he's surrounded by his wife, family, and friends and will continue to stay positive to beat this disease. Sandberg was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 2005 and won 9 consecutive Gold Gloves during his career as a second baseman with the Chicago Cubs. We are all rooting for Ryne Sandberg and a healthy recovery. And coming up in the program, what the end of Ron DeSantis' presidential campaign means. But first, the hefty price Chicago taxpayers are footing for police misconduct. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A WTTW News analysis found Chicago taxpayers paid nearly $143 million to resolve lawsuits involving repeated misconduct by 141 police officers. The payouts made over 4 years came in spite of efforts to rein in cops who repeatedly violate the rules. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with what she and WTTW's Jared Rutecki found. Heather, you've been following this, so break down the numbers for us. How big a problem does the city face from these repeated allegations of police misconduct that then result in lawsuits?
So Chicago taxpayers paid a total of $295 million to resolve claims of misconduct over the past 4 years. Nearly 60% of that total, that $143 million that you mentioned, were due to officers being named in more than one lawsuit, showing that so much of this exorbitant cost is due to the city's inability to prevent repeated cases of misconduct from the same officers.
And you focused on one officer in particular. His name is Detective Rocco Pruger. How come?
Well, he was named in 6 lawsuits that the city settled over that 4-year period for a total of $260,000. Now, he worked alongside 2 officers who were convicted of crimes during their roles as tactical officers, and we obtained records from from the Police Misconduct Investigative Agency that shows the city is well aware that officers implicated in that scandal are still on the street. Now, I reached out to Detective Pruger. He did not respond to my request for comment, and the mayor's office declined to comment about why an officer with that kind of record still earns $125,000 and is the member in good standing of the Chicago Police Department.
Well, that leads to the next question. So why don't city officials step in and do something about officers who have cost taxpayers money time and time again, stop them from doing it again?
The city does not systematically track the causes of lawsuits that lead to payouts by taxpayers. Now, they have said that they are working to solve this problem in several different ways, but it is simply not possible for the city to hold the officers responsible accountable for this pattern identified now for the second time in 4 months by WTTW News.
And what about efforts to create a system that alerts police brass when officers are the subject of multiple lawsuits?
So that kind of early warning system is required by the consent decree, which of course requires the Chicago Police Department to reform itself. There's also a new system in the works by the law department that will track these kind of misconduct cases. That won't launch until March, and the early warning system remains in a pilot status with no date set for launch.
All right, Heather, you've been following this great reporting as usual.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read the full story and analysis by Heather and Jared Rutecki on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. Back with more right after this. The Chicago White Sox might be on the move just a little bit north to the parcel of land known as the 78. The Sun-Times first reported last week that the team has been in serious talks with developer Related Midwest and the city about building a new stadium there bordered by the south branch of the Chicago River, Roosevelt Road, and Clark Street. But that would mean packing their bags and leaving the team's home for more than a century, Bridgeport. Could this be a home run for the Sox, or is it another strikeout for a team having troubles on the field? And joining us to talk about this are Mark Gannis, president of the Sports Business Consulting from Sports Corp. He's worked on more than 24 sports facility projects. And Sinwe Mendoza, a sports consultant based in Chicago. We also invited the Chicago White Sox and Related Midwest, but neither accepted our invitation tonight. We're glad to talk to both of you tonight. Mark Gannis, this kind of rhymes with what happened 30 years ago. Jerry Reinsdorf threatens to move to Tampa. The state steps in and they build a new stadium. How serious do you think these talks are for the 78?
I think they're actually quite serious for a number of reasons. One is the White Sox lease is coming up over at Guaranteed Rate Field. They need about 6 years to plan. It's about that much time left. Jerry Reinsdorf is in his mid to late 80s. He does want to leave the team in good hands and in Chicago. He is committed to the city. And this site is a great site. Related Midwest has come out and said some public statements about it. And it would really be a major step forward for the White Sox if they could build a new ballpark on this site.
Sinwe Mendoza, is this the right spot for a new White Sox? I mean, it's still the south side, technically, about 1,100, 1,200 south, not 3,500 south.
Yeah, well, you said it yourself. It's still the south side of Chicago, so they'd stay at home and in a really great location. The 78 is something that has actually been explored in the late 60s. That area was actually explored as a place to put sports teams. And I think it was a missed opportunity then. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for the White Sox to stay on the south side of Chicago, but in the South Loop, somewhere that's very well developed next to very good transportation and an actual CTA stop that might get built in the area, in an area that, essentially is exploding and not too far from Wintrust Arena that's already another sports facility in Soldier Field.
Yeah, there's lots of transit around there. But Mark, I mentioned it's like, 30 some odd years ago when he threatened to move. And then the state stepped in and created this quasi-public-private Illinois Sports Facility Authority, basically to fund the whole thing. So is this what's going to happen now? Is the Sports Facility Authority going to issue hotel bonds to pay for the whole thing?
Well, it has to be paid for somehow. And Jerry has shown a knack of being able to get the public sector to pony up a lot of money for stadiums, not just in Chicago. He did the same thing in Washington when the Expos moved down from Montreal. That all having been said, it's a different environment now. Paris, it's a very tough environment to get the kind of deal that was done back then with the arm twisting of Governor Jim Thompson and Speaker Michael Madigan, who had a lot to trade back then. There isn't the same kind of economic situation in Springfield or in Chicago. There's a lot of money that's tied into the Soldier Field bonds that have been refinanced multiple times from the same tax source as well. So they'll have to be more creative this time. There'll likely be more private involvement in this one than there was. And, we're in a situation where if not on this site, there may be some other suburban locations that could work where they could build real estate around it to help offset the cost of building and operating the stadium. But this is a great site if they're going to stay within the city, maybe the best site if they're going to stay within the city proper.
Sinway Mendoza, how attractive is that to someone like Jay Reinsdorf, the fact that there's this real estate where they can build hotels and event spaces?
Well, I think it's very important. In the modern day, everybody's trying to emulate the Wrigleyville, the entertainment district. It came organically with Wrigleyville, but everyone's done it from St. Louis to, here in Kansas City, where I'm sitting just blocks away from where they're going to build. One of the things the Royals has committed to, should they build a downtown ballpark, is to an entertainment district to continue the development of downtown Kansas City. So it looks very good on paper, but going back to it, what Mark just said, where's the money going to come from to build this beautiful 30,000 seat ballpark? The ballpark that they're going to build in Vegas for the Athletics when they move from Oakland has a cost figure of $1.5 billion. Right? So where is that going to come? I think, like Mark says, it's going to have to come with some private money, and you're going to have to get creative beyond the University of Illinois Institute going in there, hotels, bring bars in, and having it be a full commitment from the city, from, the aldermen and everybody involved.
Well, speaking of the aldermen, we invited Pat Dowell, whose ward includes the 78, onto the show. She declined, but sent a statement that said, in part, quote, "After meeting with the development team at Related Midwest today, I believe the proposed Chicago White Sox stadium can be a positive anchor for the new 78 community. Assuming the financial deals can be worked out, this development shows promise as a great growth opportunity for the city of Chicago. The addition of significant market and affordable housing, retail, and a world-class baseball stadium and concert venue can be the sort of catalytic investment this city needs." So, Mark Gannis, it seems like they already got a skeptical alderman kind of on board here with all these kind of benefits for the city.
Wouldn't it be nice if the alderman could write the check for it as well? Yes, you've got to have that. You've got to have some momentum. You've got to have positive statements by the political officials. But we also have to recognize the toxicity of our political environment here in Chicago, the drain on resources, things that are expected, like new union contracts, and things that are unexpected, like the migrant crisis that we have. So this is going to be a challenge financially. But the site is a great site. The alderman is absolutely right about that. The location would be great for the White Sox for generations to come. It's where the city is growing residentially, entertainment, retail. So it would really create a really great Southwest anchor to what's been going on around Roosevelt Road and that whole area. Lots to say why this should happen. But, as things happen around here, things that should happen don't, and things that aren't needed sometimes do. So we'll see what happens with this one. But it would be a great project if it could come together.
Sinway, perhaps one of the things that should have happened over the years is the Sox investing like this into Bridgeport. There isn't much of any kind of community around the stadium. You have to go under the tracks or over the expressway. Do you think it's a good move for the team to leave a home that they've been for more than a century?
Well, it would be tough because that is actually the White Sox have been there far longer. You know, the original stadium was just blocks away in one of those lots that now has tailgating going on. I have been one of those people that I mentioned the entertainment district. They could build an entertainment district right next to a red line stop, right next to a green line stop, and next to a Metro stop. So the current White Sox location is actually the best in all of Chicago sports in terms of getting there in public trans. And what I've always said is, you know, the ballpark is actually, I love going there, and I will say I'm a Cubs fan. I live 2 blocks from Wrigley Field, and I still love going to the ballpark. It's easy to access and everything. And it could easily have an entertainment district built alongside the red line using some of those lots. That was my first thought is, you know, why not just develop the land? There's quite a bit of it, but maybe that's something that you look at the Chicago Fire, the Chicago Bears, should the White Sox make the right move to go to the 78 and say, hey, now we have all these lots, Chicago Bears, why don't you stay in the city and, you know, build there, you know, this facility that's going to get us some Super Bowl, some national titles, and, you know, WWE, WrestleMania.
Isn't that a tantalizing thought?
Sky's the limit if you can keep the Chicago out.
All these potential giant new stadium projects, you both must be salivating right now. Thanks to Mark Gannis and Sinway Mendoza for joining us. And up next, the Republican presidential primary field narrows, so stay with us. All eyes turn to New Hampshire tomorrow in the race for the Republican presidential nomination. It's the first time voters will head to the polls for a primary election following last week's Iowa caucus. They'll cast their ballots just days after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announces he's suspending his campaign, and that leaves a 2-person battle between former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley and former President Donald Trump. And joining us now is Lynn Sweet, Washington Bureau Chief of the Chicago Sun-Times. Lynn, thanks for coming back and talking to us again. When we last talked on the Week in Review Friday, DeSantis was still in the race. So how does this announcement and now endorsement of Trump change things in New Hampshire?
Well, it changes things mainly for Nikki Haley, Paris, because she's getting the one-on-one that she's been wanting. Whether or not the DeSantis endorsement of Trump really helps him, I think remains to be seen. The Tim Scott endorsement of Trump I see as more meaningful because after the New Hampshire primary and a few weeks after that, on February 24th, comes the South Carolina primary. And as we know, this is a test of whether or not the home state will rally behind the former 2-term South Carolina governor. So DeSantis doesn't mean that much per se, but the stakes then grow exponentially higher for Nikki Haley.
You know, at one point it seemed like DeSantis was either running neck and neck with Trump or had held leads on Trump way back when, where it appeared maybe the GOP was ready to move on. What happened?
Well, what happened is that Trump's base is movement-like. And if you have DeSantis saying he's more or less like Trump, but maybe younger and a little less chaotic, when you have the real thing, why would you go with DeSantis? He never was able to build a campaign that was able to erode any of the movement feel that Trump has, even though he camped out in 99 counties and in Iowa, he got very little return for all that time he invested there. Another reason he dropped out without wanting to go through New Hampshire is that he never invested as much time or resources in New Hampshire, so there was no chance that he would have any momentum coming out of the Granite State race.
And it certainly doesn't seem like Nikki Haley has momentum going into the Granite State race as she had before. It seems like Trump's lead has only widened in the last few weeks. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that actually Nikki Haley has gotten more of a wind behind her back. Trump has been focusing on her. He even says things that aren't true. No surprise, where he says that Democrats are going to go into the primary, first in the nation primary, to vote for her. Just to tidy this up for everyone listening, in New Hampshire, they've got rules about party changing. If you're a Democrat, you should have switched over by October 3rd of the last year to have switched your registration. So, what is hard to figure out in gaming out whether or not Trump is the eventual nominee is if movement politics wipe out the moderate Republicans and the people who think it's just time to move on from Trump. Right now, we've had one test, and tomorrow we'll see another, about the strength of Trump's movement that, of course, kind of defies political gravity.
If Nikki Haley loses but comes in a close second or within 5 points, does that give her some kind of momentum going forward? Especially you mentioned South Carolina, her home state, coming up.
Well, if she wins, it would, of course, be the most momentum. But the test for her really is coming in a few weeks in this February 24th South Carolina primary. If she does not do well, and maybe an outright win, which, again, Trump is pulling ahead, or coming close, it will be harder for her to stay on to, let's say, Super Tuesday, when there's a lot of delegates at stake. The way you get to be a delegate, to be a presidential nominee, is to get delegates. South Carolina, it's a winner-take-all state. It doesn't have that many delegates. Illinois has more than that. But in terms of just keeping the donor base happy, which is very important in these early voting states, it just makes it far more difficult for her to try and collect delegates in smaller wins if she doesn't do very well in South Carolina.
Lynn, you know, we have to mention the fact that Trump is facing 91 criminal indictments, including an alleged attempt to overturn the last election. Are you surprised that the party has, by and large, rallied to his side again, just given the fact that, like you said, he's got the movement here. He's the one that still looks like the standard bearer.
Well, his gift to communication is to get people to see things the way he does, even if it seems to defy what you see with your own eyes, such as videotape of the attack on the Capitol January 6th. From my analysis is, from what I've read of interviews of Trump supporters, is that they just discount all the criminal charges against him without making a lot of distinction that the cases are different. The case about keeping documents is very different than the cases dealing with trying to overturn the election and send in and to try and tamper with the results. There's no difference in that.
And not to mention all the civil cases, too. All right, Lynn, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Paris.
And up next, why Northwest Indiana got so much snow, but Chicago did not. So stay with us.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
Northwest Indiana got socked with near whiteout conditions and almost 3 feet of snow in some areas on Friday. 3 feet, wow. Why the big storm there, but not right here in Chicago? It's because of the phenomenon known as lake effect snow. You may have heard the term, but do you know what it means? Our Patty Wetley tells us in this edition of WTTW News Explains.
Between the wind and the cold and the sun disappearing for what seems like months at a time, winter in Chicago is not for the faint of heart. But it could be worse. We could live in one of these cities, the snowiest in the U.S. Notice a pattern here? They're all on the wrong side of a Great Lake. And by wrong side, we mean the side most likely to get socked with lake effect snow. Oh yeah, the lake effect snow machine is real. It's unpredictable and capable of dumping tons of snow in a short amount of time. And just because we're on the right side of the lake doesn't mean we're safe. When the wind turns on Chicago, watch out. So what causes lake effect snow? Two things: cold air and comparatively warmer water. Here's how it works. During a typical Midwestern winter, cold winds swoop in from the north, which, not to point fingers, usually means Canada. The Great Lakes hold onto their heat longer than the surrounding land, so when this cold air passes over the warmer water, it soaks up moisture like a sponge. Depending which way the wind is blowing, it might cross a lot of water, and the more water it travels over, the more moisture it picks up. When this wet, warm air mass hits land and starts to cool again, whammo, lake effect snow. The weirdest thing about lake effect snow is how it can fall fast and furious in one place while the sun is shining just a mile or two away. Storm? What storm? That's because unlike large weather systems, lake effect events tend to be hyper-local. So what keeps Chicago from being Buffalo? Well, here, wind patterns typically flow west to east, pushing that wet, warm air toward Indiana and Michigan. Sorry, not sorry. But when the winds switch, that's when the city gets a taste of the snowpocalypse. Chicago winter. It could be worse, and sometimes it is. Thanks, Lake Effect Snow.
And you can visit our website for more in our Emmy Award-winning series, WTTW News Explains, including how Illinois highway exits are numbered and where Chicago's nicknames came from. That's all at WTTW.com/explains. And that is our show for this Monday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast in the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and at a special time, 10:30. We take you inside the 211 Center, helping Chicagoans find resources for free. And what softer than expected revenue numbers mean for Chicago's casino. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.